Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, welcome. I'm happy you decided to join us today. As you can see by that title down below, you guys, today we'll be reacting to the man who vanished at sea for 14 months. Now that's crazy, y'all. That's a crazy title, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm super ready to get into it. I hope you guys are ready to get into it with me. So let's go.
In 2012, Salvador Alvarenga, a 37-year-old Salvadoran fisherman, was living and working in Mexico. Unburdened by family commitments, as his 13-year-old daughter was living with her mother in El Salvador, he thrived on his profession's solitary and risky nature. Alvarenga preferred a 25-foot-long fiberglass boat, devoid of a cabin or roof, designed to cut through the waves like a surfboard, agile and speedy, with the engine attached at the stern. On November 18th, he planned a voyage into the Pacific with his companion, Ezequiel Cordoba, a 22-year-old novice. Their day was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m., extending to 4 p.m., a lengthy and exhausting fishing expedition. The preparation involved the loading of over 1,000 pounds of equipment, including an icebox intended to be packed with tuna, shark, and mahi-mahi. Despite warnings of an approaching storm, Alvarenga was undeterred. The potential earnings from one day's catch were enough to sustain him for a full week. Once they were about 75 miles from shore, Alvarenga released his 2-mile-long fishing line into the ocean. The storm was intensifying on land, but its force was yet to hit them offshore. This changed at around 1 a.m. The boat began to rock violently, inducing Cordoba to plead with Alvarenga to retreat. But the burgeoning wind and waves began to flood their boat, prompting Alvarenga to make a desperate decision. He cut the fishing line, discarding thousands of dollars worth of equipment and fish into the sea. Simultaneously, he directed the boat back towards Chocohital, his home port, and alerted his boss, Willie, about their precarious situation. At dawn, Alvarenga noticed the silhouette of the mountains on the horizon. As he was strategizing a path through the harsh shoreline surf, disaster struck. The motor stalled just 15 miles off the coast. Despite his frantic attempts to revive the outboard motor, he only succeeded in breaking the cord. The boat, subjected to high waves, tossed the men from side to side. Alvarenga reached out to Willie over the radio, begging for immediate rescue. Willie responded affirmatively, but soon after, the connection was severed as the radio got damaged by the water. The wind continued to push the boat further offshore, stranding Alvarenga and Cordoba in the growing fury of the Pacific. The men's ordeal grew exponentially with each passing day. 5 days into the storm, the winds finally began to abate. By then, Alvarenga and Cordoba found themselves approximately 280 miles offshore, a desolate, lonely stretch of the ocean rarely visited by other fishermen. Their boat was so low in the water that it would have been nearly invisible to any would-be rescuers more than a half-mile away. With a heavy heart, Cordoba murmured, "We are going to die." Alvarenga, however, refused to succumb to despair. "Don't think that way," he counseled Cordoba. "A rescue mission will find us." Yet they had no flare gun, no means of communication. The days were searingly hot, and the nights were bitterly cold. They took shelter in the icebox, huddling together for warmth. Dehydration and starvation gnawed at them relentlessly. 4 days later, their desperate prayers for rain were answered. The men reveled in the downpour, relishing the rare opportunity to bathe in fresh water. They managed to collect 5 gallons of rainwater in plastic bottles they had found drifting in the sea. With careful rationing, this supply could last them a week. Roughly 11 days after their motor had failed, and after having survived on meager, bony triggerfish caught by hand, Alvarenga had an unexpected encounter. In the darkness of night, he heard a distinct thunk. A turtle had crashed into their boat. Excitedly, he hauled it aboard. This would provide sustenance, its meat for food and its dark red blood for quenching their thirst. From then on, Alvarenga spent his days hunting for more turtles. Cordoba, however, found the congealed blood repugnant and ate the meat sparingly. To coax his companion into eating, Alvarenga presented the turtle steaks as a delicacy. He would slice the meat into thin strips, add salt water for flavor, and roast them in the sun on the outboard motor housing, serving this meal on a turtle shell. While the turtle meat staved off the worst effects of starvation, the men were barely surviving. Their imaginations, fueled by hunger, began to hallucinate. A delirious Cordoba started yearning for oranges. Alvarenga humored him, feigning a trip to an imaginary store to fetch the requested fruit, only to return and inform him that the store is closed and that it will be opened within an hour. This ruse, remarkably, comforted Cordoba, and he fell asleep. As weeks turned into months, Alvarenga and Cordoba found themselves adrift on the unforgiving sea. A routine of survival gradually emerged. Each day at 5 a.m., Alvarenga would awaken and sit on the deck. The sun's rising on the eastern horizon gave him hope of the distant land where their world lay. His mornings would typically involve checking the traps for any fish caught overnight. Yet regardless of the catch, he would always wait for Cordoba to wake up before dividing their meager rations. The greater part of the day was spent within the confines of the icebox, succumbing to the need for rest. Even though they were initially strangers, when they embarked on this fateful journey, a strong bond of friendship developed between the two men. Like teenagers on a grand adventure, they would lie down at night, their faces turned towards the sky, and playfully invent constellations. On a night they calculated to be Christmas Eve, their meager holiday feast was abruptly interrupted when Cordoba doubled over in pain. He had eaten part of a seabird earlier, and upon dissection, they discovered a poisonous snake within the bird's stomach. Although he physically recovered, the psychological trauma took a toll on Cordoba. The thought of eating...
These men are so freaking strong. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did it. And I hate to be this person, but it's like, if I was in conditions like that, I would try to keep my faith. Don't get me wrong. I would try to stay positive and keep my faith and stuff like that. But like, y'all, I don't know. I don't know. You have to be like, you got to be built different for this type of stuff. Like, that's why I'm starting to realize that probably one of my biggest fears is water. And not just any water, like the ocean. That's probably one of my biggest fears. So we're going to put that right next to spiders and heights. So spiders, heights, ocean. Biggest fears. This is remarkable. And I really hope for the best outcome, for sure. This is remarkable.
Another raw seabird filled him with revulsion, and he began to distance himself from their shared meals. As days turned into weeks, Cordoba's health rapidly deteriorated. His body began to shrink, his arms thinned to stick-like proportions, his thighs narrowed to the width of his forearms. He had made up his mind that it was better to die at sea than to endure the agonizing pangs of starvation. He bid farewell and attempted to throw himself into the shark-infested waters. Alvarenga managed to overpower Cordoba, dragged him across the boat's floor, and forcibly placed him in the icebox. While sitting atop the lid, he pleaded with Cordoba to abandon his suicidal thoughts. After calming down, Cordoba was released, and Alvarenga climbed into the icebox with him, imploring him to fight, to live so they could tell their story. But the crushing weight of despair had already taken hold. A few days later, Cordoba announced his impending death. Alvarenga tried to make him drink water, but to no avail. In his desperation, Alvarenga begged, "Don't die. Don't leave me alone." But it was to no avail. Moments later, Cordoba passed away. To prevent his friend's body from sliding into the water, Alvarenga propped him up on a bench. The morning following Cordoba's passing found Alvarenga grappling with his loss. Emerging from the icebox, he looked at his deceased companion, who was propped up on the bench, seemingly sunbathing. In an attempt to cope with his grief, Alvarenga began to converse with the lifeless body, asking Cordoba about his sleep and pretending to receive answers from the other side. He decided that pretending his companion was still alive was the easiest way to deal with the reality of his death. 6 days after Cordoba's death, Alvarenga performed the final act of farewell. He slid his friend's body into the water. Alone and adrift in the vast Pacific, he retreated back into the icebox, where he allowed his grief to overflow in a flood of tears. With Cordoba gone, Alvarenga turned his attention towards survival. He focused on hunting in the hope of eventual rescue, which provided necessary distractions from his daily isolation. He even devised a shark detection system that permitted him to take brief but nerve-wracking swims. He would throw some birds' feet into the water, and if no sharks appeared, he would plunge in. He sought solace in these small, refreshing escapades from his floating prison, imagining he was at a beach with friends. Increasingly, Alvarenga found strength in the memory of his estranged relationship with his 14-year-old daughter, Fatima, whom he hadn't seen in years. He dreamed of her calling out to him, and these visions filled him with joy. He started to fantasize about a life back home, a life as a family man with a house full of children and a field of animals. He beseeched the heavens for one more chance to mend his relationship with Fatima. One day, a container vessel appeared on the horizon, heading directly towards Alvarenga. The ship approached so close that he feared it might cleave his boat in half. Spotting 3 figures near the stern, fishing rods in hand, Alvarenga yelled out to them. They waved back. He had been seen. But to his dismay, nobody aboard the ship moved to help. They continued to wave casually as the ship cruised past him. Frustration and despair overwhelmed Alvarenga as the ship disappeared into the distance. His mind began to falter, his reflexes slowed, and his hunger was gradually being replaced by a lethargic desire to simply close his eyes and succumb to the emptiness. The same apathy that had claimed Cordoba was now threatening to consume Alvarenga's spirit as well. Alvarenga had been adrift for 11 months, drifting 5,000 miles at an average speed of less than a mile per hour. His clothes were in tatters, with only a sweatshirt that once belonged to Cordoba shielding him from the sun. He was virtually naked from the waist down, barring a pair of ragged underwear and a random sneaker retrieved from the sea. His head sported a tangled mane of copper-colored hair, and his face was obscured by a thick, bushy beard. Throughout this ordeal, Alvarenga contemplated whether his journey was a divine lesson, a message he was destined to carry. Given the circumstances, it seemed miraculous that he was still alive.
Yeah.
He pondered if he was spared to provide hope to those contemplating suicide, using his own harrowing experience of solitude at sea as a cautionary tale. On January 30th, 2014, Alvarenga noticed coconuts floating in the water and a sky filled with shorebirds, while a cold rain limited his visibility. Upon staring out from the deck, he discerned a tiny tropical island emerging from the rainy haze. It seemed untamed, devoid of roads, cars, or homes. His initial impulse was to jump overboard and swim towards the land, but wary of sharks, he decided to wait. It took him half a day to reach land, diving into the water when he was 10 yards from the shore and allowing a wave to carry him in. Left face down on the beach by the receding wave, Alvarenga clutched a handful of sand as if it were a treasure. Alvarenga was discovered by the only 2 inhabitants of the island. He had washed ashore on the Ebon Atoll, the southernmost point of the Marshall Islands, one of the most isolated places on Earth. Had he missed Ebon, his next potential landing spot would have been the Philippines, a daunting 3,000 miles away. Upon being admitted to a hospital, Alvarenga was diagnosed with anemia, a condition associated with a deficiency of red cells or hemoglobin in the blood. Physicians conjectured that his consumption of raw turtles and birds during his journey may have caused parasites to infect.
Yo, look at him. I cannot believe he made it. 14 months, y'all. 14 months. This man's willingness to survive Wow. How freaking amazing. I'm really lost for words.
Raw turtles and birds during his journey may have caused parasites to infect his liver. Consequently, deep sleep evaded him, leaving him in a perpetually restless state. As he grappled with his physical ailments, he was also haunted by the memory of Cordoba's death. After 11 days, Alvarenga's health improved enough for him to return home to El Salvador. Upon seeing his daughter Fatima, he held her tight, expressing his love and his regret for the lost years. Adapting to life on land wasn't easy. For months, Alvarenga remained in shock, developing an intense phobia not only of the ocean, but even of water's sight. He slept with the lights on and required constant company. It took him a year to fully comprehend the magnitude of his voyage. When the confusion cleared and he examined the maps of his drift across the Pacific Ocean, Alvarenga began to grasp the incredible nature of his 438-day journey. He had endured extreme hunger, thirst, and loneliness on the brink of sanity. Yet he had held on to life, an embodiment of human resilience and survival against overwhelming odds. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the other great content on our channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.
His resilience was just, it was second to none. It was really out of this world. And Fatima, girl, you are blessed to have a father like that. Even with all the time or the years that had passed and stuff like that, for him to, like, you know, make it through something so freaking traumatic and come home to you and make things right. It's absolutely beautiful. And I'm happy that, I'm happy he fought for his daughter. I'm happy he pulled through, he made it. That man was extremely resilient, for sure. This one was like, it was bittersweet. It had like a good ending, but I am kind of devastated at how, you know, we lost one, but one survived. But the story was, it was miraculous. It was very, very, very heartwarming. You know what I mean? Man, survival. What can you say? They say, what? Only the strong survive, right? There it is there. There it is there. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please make sure you are tapping that love button for me. When you do that, it lets the algorithm know that you guys are enjoying my content, and it lets me know that you guys want me to keep putting out this type of content. You know what I mean? So it works both ways. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now. And when you do subscribe, because I know you're going to, go the extra mile, tap that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I do upload a video. Therefore, you won't miss me, I won't miss you, and we won't miss each other, okay? And yeah, until next time, bye!
It's Miaaaa, that girl you came to see. So grab your snack and just sit back, leave a comment in the chat. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's Miaaaa, that girl you came to see. So grab your snack and just sit back, leave a comment in the chat.